Welcome to AngularJS with me, Muhammad Maruf Najm. Today we're going to learn how to upload multiple files using AngularJS Drag and Drop. As you see in the address bar of the browser, I have created a project called Upload with Drag and Drop. Also, as you see here, I have created a div of which we can drag and drop files. When you drag and drop your files, they will be previewed here, along with your names and sizes. Also here, I have created a text area in which you can write some comment. The purpose of having created a text area here is to learn how to send other form data with files in the same request. First of all, I'm going to give you a demonstration of the application to see how it works in real world. First of all, I am going to check that the uploads folder is empty. Then I am going to a folder containing some files. I select some of these files and drag them over that div on the browser and drop them there. Now that I have dropped them here, I see their previews with their names and sizes. For example, this is the first image and this is its name and this is its size. And likewise for the others. Also, if you want, you can remove some of these files that are not needed to be uploaded. Now, I'm going to write a piece of comment inside the text area. But before sending the request to the server, I want to show you the console of the browser. As you see, the console is empty for the time being. When I hit the save button, I see that there is a response in the console that has come from the server. This response, as you see here, contains two things: a description and an array of all file names which were sent to the server. Now, if I check the uploads folder, I see that 4 files or 4 images have been uploaded here. And also, if I go to the text editor and check the uploads folder, I see that there are 4 images inside this folder. Now, I'm going to start coding. I go to the index.html. As you see here, I have imported a CSS library just for applying some styles on some of my elements. And also I have written my own styles here. Inside the body tag, here I have imported the AngularJS library that is necessarily needed for the application to work. Now, I am going to write my AngularJS codes here. I create a script tag, and inside this tag, first of all, I'm going to create a self-executing function. Inside the body of this function, first of all, I use the useString directive, which prevents me from using undeclared variables. Then I create my module and I name it module. Now I come here and create a div element. I set the ng-app directive of this div to module, the module that I have created. Now in here, I'm going to create my controller. and I call this controller. Then here I create my own directive. I call this directive file drop zone. And also the second parameter to this directive is an anonymous function which returns an object. Now in here I create another div. I set its class attribute to this file drop zone CSS class. Now I'm going to use this directive here. And also here I am going to set its restrict property to A, which indicates that this directive is going to be an attribute directive. I set its scope property to an object, which for the time being contains only one element, with key as files to upload and value is the assignment operator. I use these files to upload here. And set it to files. And these files must be an array on the scope inside the controller. Then I'm going to create my link function, which receives three parameters: the scope, the element, and the attributes of the element. Inside the body of this function, first of all, I'm going to bind the drag over event to this element and give an anonymous function as a second parameter to the bind method. Inside the body of this anonymous function, first I check if the argument is not null. If so, I call the prevent default method of E. Then I set the e.dataTransfer.effectAllowed to copy. And finally, I change the class attribute of this element to another class. The class has been defined here. I copy it and paste it there. Now I bind another event to the element. This event is called drag enter. And I do the same thing as I did with a drag over event. I copy this piece of code and paste it here. Now I bind the drop event to the element, and I also pass another anonymous function as the second parameter to the bind method. Inside the body of this anonymous function, first of all, I change the class attribute of this element to this class that you see here. I check if the argument is not null. If so, I call the prevent default method of E. Then I create an array and I call it file objects array. After that, using Angular for each loop, I iterate among all files. And for each file, I create a file reader object and I call it reader. Then I set the onload property of the reader to an anonymous function which receives an argument as an event. Inside the body of this anonymous function, I call the $apply method of the scoop and I pass another anonymous function as an argument to this method. Inside the body of this anonymous function, first of all, I create my file preview. Then I create my file name, and after that, I create my file size. Then I create an object and I call it file object, which contains 4 properties. The first is the file. The second is the name of the file. The third is the size, and the fourth is the preview of the file. I should tell you that the file property of this object is the file which is going to be uploaded to the server. And after that, I push this file object into the file objects array. Now, in here, I call the read as data URL method of the reader object and pass the file as a value to this method. And here, I set the scoop.files to upload to the file objects array that I have created above. Now, here I create a span with a text inside it. I save the changes, go to the browser, refresh the page, and now I can see the text here. I go back to the code. Here, I create a div, and inside this div, I create another div. Now, I want to iterate among all elements of this files array. I copy these files and paste it here. Inside this div, I create another div and set its class attribute to the image container class. I copy this class and paste it here. Then I create an image tag and set its ng-src directive to the preview property of the file object. And then I set its class attribute to the image thumbnail class. I save the changes, go to the browser, refresh the page, go to a folder containing some images. I select this image, drag it over here, and drop it here. As you see in the address bar, this image or this file has been opened in the browser. It means that there must be a problem within our code. I see that the code has worked successfully. I go back to the code. I create a div here for the name property of the file. And then another div to display the size of the file. And use a filter to display only 2 digits after the decimal point. All images along with their names and sizes have been previewed successfully. Now I go back to the code. Here I create another div, and inside this div I create a text area. I set its class attribute to the text area class, which has been defined above. I set its ng-model directive or attributive directive to description. Now here I create another div, and inside this div I create a button. I mean the save button. And I set its ng-click attributive directive to save. And this save function must be defined on the scoop object here. Now I save the changes, go to the browser, refresh the page, and I see that a text area and a button have been created here. Now, these 3 properties of each file inside the files array that you see here have been created here. And this file is the exact file which needs to be sent to the server. Here, I create a span to work as a remove button for each file on the web page. Also, I set its ng-click directive to the remove function, which I'm going to create inside the controller. And I pass the index of the file as a value to this remove function. I create this remove function on the scoop inside the controller. I save the changes, go to the browser, refresh the page, and drag and drop some images here. Now I see that every file has a remove button above it. As you see here, I have a save button. When I hit the save button, the form data along with all files must be sent to the server. Now I go back to my controller, and here I'm going to write the implementation of this save function. Inside the body of this function, first of all, I create a form data object and I call it fd. Then, using a loop, I iterate among all files of the scoop.files array. And for each one, I create a key. I call this key file object, and its value is the concatenation of the file string and the key of the file. I append the file to the form data object. I should tell you that this file is exactly this file, which is an element of this scoop.files array. And this file is a property of this file, which has been defined here for this file object. Now here, we can append other form data if we have to the fd object. Now I'm going to create an HTTP request using the $HTTP service. Now I'm going to send my request to the upload.php file. But before sending the request, I should check that there must be at least one file to be uploaded to the server. So if there is at least one file or more than one file, then we can send our request using the then method of the request object. Now, inside the upload.php file, inside this file, first of all, I create a variable I call a description and set it to the value of the description text area. Then, using a loop, I iterate among all files which come to this PHP file. And for each file, I create an index. This value is going to be the concatenation of the file's string and the value of the I counter. This string must be exactly the same as this string that you see here. Using the JSON underscore encode function of PHP, I encode this associative array, I mean this data array, and return it back to the client or browser. Here, inside the body of this anonymous function, I want to print the response which comes from the server in the console. When I hit the save button, I see that there is an error message in the console, which tells me that the upload is not defined. So now, I go back to my AngularJS code. When I hit the save button, in the console, I see that there is an error, and this error is inside the upload.php file on line 16. Now I see that there is a response for me, which contains a description and an array of all file names. If now I go to the Uploads folder inside the text editor, I see that these 3 files have been uploaded successfully inside that folder. And now here inside the controller, I make the scoop.files array empty so that no file must be displayed on the web page after they've been uploaded. When I hit the save button in the console, I see that there is a response for me containing a description and an array of all file names. But on the web page, I see that there is no more file previewed. If I check the Uploads folder inside the text editor, I see that 2 other files have been uploaded to this folder as well. And also for the validation of the types and sizes of files, I will create another series as soon as I can. Thanks for watching this series.